In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, I'm standing up today. So I'm trying to see if it's live. Yes. In the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, welcome to another session of lessons from my mother. We are on lesson 41. Imagine that. Today, this is a big week for me. I'm doing a very important assessment at my university where I work. But I wanted to come and share this lesson as soon as possible before I continue on with work. ये सब तुम्हारा करम है आका के बात अब तक बनी हुई है मैं कहाँ था इस करम के काबिल ये सब तेरी बंदा परवरी है मेहनत करे इंसान तो क्या हो नहीं सकता वो कौन सा अक़दा है जो वहाँ हो नहीं सकता जो था नहीं है जो है ना होगा यही है एक हर्फ मेहरबाना करीब तर है नमूद जिसकी उसी का मुश्ताक है ज़माना and many others and many others. So these are lines of poetry. I'll get to some English ones in a bit that my mum and other members of my family have exposed to us from a young age. दिल से जो बात निकलती है असर रखती है पर नहीं ताकते परवाज मगर रखती है. There's so many. And mum always used to say, I think she still says it, to have a few lines of poetry just memorized, to have a limerick at hand, to know a few jokes. And I used to say, that's ridiculous. Why do I need to go to places and have a few jokes to tell? My personality is enough. Well, turns out personality isn't always enough. Sometimes you need a little elbow grease. Sometimes you need a little mercury in between spaces. Sometimes you need to break things down. It's not always highly intellectual. It's not always highly practical. But sometimes if you're sitting with a friend and say, do you want to hear a joke? And they'd say, yeah. And you say, horse walks into a barman says, why the long face? For example, or what's orange and sounds like a parrot? What? A carrot. These kinds of small jokes, and the person was like, that's a stupid joke. Why would you say that? Or in Urdu Hindi, we say, बहुत ज़्यादा बादाम खाने से क्या होता है? क्या? बादाम खत्म हो जाता है. I heard this joke, I think it was last year or the year before, and I cracked up, and my mum cracked up, and every time I tell it to somebody, I just lose it. It's the most unexpected thing. When I said to people, बहुत ज़्यादा बादाम खाने से क्या होता है? In English, it means what happens when you eat a lot of almonds. And their response is, oh, stomach ulcer, stomach this, oh, this, that. And then you say, badam khatam ho jate, which means the almonds finish off. They're like, what? Oh. And then they break out into laughter. What that does is it creates this social, I would say, asymmetry is not the right word. But decentering, not decentralization, decentering. Or maybe there's another word which I'm not using appropriately. But what it does is it takes the convention of people speaking to each other and then it twists it a bit. It knocks it a bit off course, knocks it off balance a bit, and it leads to new things. For example, I've done doctoral, post-grad, grad. I've had some very good professors. And with professors, you always keep a very civil, respectful, curious, intellectual relationship. But after I would get to know them a bit, I would crack these kinds of jokes. What that did was it broke the social convention. And I started seeing them in different lights, but they also started seeing me in a different light. They started laughing. And for example, I remember when I went back for my first master's in Turkey, the dean of my faculty, who ended up being my advisor, he had known me quite well during my undergrad years, and we had become good friends. So the first time I was in class, he was introducing everyone. He's like, oh, this student does this. And Ali Pasha, well, we had a love affair, and then he left me, and I was like, And the whole class laughed. And he looked at me and he like chuckled, and I chuckled back, and I just riffed, and we did a back and forth for like 10, 15 seconds. It's the social glue that holds you. So if you're able to tell a joke and you're able to build upon a relationship that you're developing and make the other person laugh, it breaks what exists, the professional, conventional structure. Poetry can do that too, because normally we don't speak in poetics, do we? We speak in prose. We say correct sentences all the time. But when it's poetry, it breaks the flow, the cadence, the tonality. And most poetry, if not all poetry, because there's some horrible poetry out there, I'm calling out some Canadian poets who have received fame for no reason, but I shall not name them. Most poetry has a deeper meaning. It's layered. So you might say something and the person will say, huh, and they take it at face value, and then they say, what you're saying maybe means this. And they find a depth to the conversation, which otherwise you may not have been able to achieve in a short period of time if it were just prose. So, for example, this thing that I quoted, मेहनत करे इंसान तो क्या हो नहीं सकता, वो कौन सा अब्दा है जो वहाँ हो नहीं सकता. That's something that my mom had told me. Grade 3, it means if one works hard, what is there that cannot be done? What problem is there that cannot be solved, or what conundrum is there that cannot be resolved? And the way it is said breaks the rhythm of the conversation, and suddenly the message hits you differently. That's why poetry has existed for, I would say, thousands of years. That's why the Quran is pure divine poetry. That's the way God communicates. Because if it were just prose, people would break it apart in different ways. But poetry is very much tied to the way it's structured. You could say the same thing in different arrangements, and then you say which one is the best one. It's a prioritization. So that changes the way one communicates. I'll give you an example of one that I love. I saw it first in the film The Great Debaters. It's a 2009 film, 2007, 2006 maybe, with Denzel Washington and a few other big actors. I am the darker brother. They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh, and I eat well, and I grow strong. Tomorrow I'll sit at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I, too, am America. This is by Langston Hughes, 1925, 1924. Wow, almost 100 years ago. Wow, Langston Hughes. It's from that time. Look all that he has said in maybe 8 or 9 verses. Tomorrow I will sit at the table when company comes. And the past is, I eat well and I grow strong. It's talking about the field Negro and the house Negro and the whole struggle of the black American. Slave and then independent, or slave, free, liberated citizen, and then civil rights and so forth. This was before Martin Luther King, perhaps even before Martin Luther King was born, if I'm not mistaken. So this is Langston Hughes, 1925. There were others. Zora Neale Hurston was at that time. A couple of others were at that time, where they started pushing against the existing grain and saying, no, this is what we are. But look how succinct it is. Besides, they will see how beautiful I am and be ashamed. I too am America. The structuring is so incredible. It's not very common, I've noticed, in Canada. Maybe it is in the francophone sectors, but it's not very common for one to start quoting poetry when they're having a conversation. But in England, some people, particularly the upper class or the elites, they still tend to do it. They speak to you, hey, yes, it's very good. Summer tea, and then they start reciting poetry. And you're like, whoa, okay, there's some Tennyson right there. Okay, there's some Keats. I had some Shakespeare. So they start doing that. But I haven't noticed it here. I might start using it more and more because it does everything that my mum has taught, but also it develops relationships. I'll give you an example of this. Now he's a senior level architect, but I've known him when he was at the mid level of his career. Good friend of mine. Also went to the same university I did, so very technically sound. And he is a great admirer of Allama Muhammad Iqbal, who is one of the greatest poets in human history, the poet of Pakistan, one of the great poets of the east of South Asia. He's a Sufi, he's a mystic, he's a great man. And there are people in Pakistan, including this architect I'm talking about, shout out to Hamad Hussain, who know verses upon verses upon verses of this poet. Verses upon verses. And I remember watching this senior friend of mine at a debate. There was a political debate happening about a highway being constructed in Islamabad's hillside mountain range. And then this person was on a debate, and within the debate, he quoted Iqbal like 3 times, just like this, right a verse at the right time, attacked. And I said to him, I never knew that you were so well versed in Iqbal. He said, of course, I know so much. And I said, I know so much. I have his books. I read his books. My father's uncle is an expert. My mother knows so much. We are so interested and so passionately involved with his writing, and that deepened our layer of friendship even further. It's almost like saying, "Oh, you like the Beatles? I like the Beatles. Hey Jude is one of my friends." Or you like Queen? I like Queen. You like Ray Charles? I like Ray Charles. It's a social glue, but it takes your relationship in a direction which very few things can. I've noticed it's poetry, maybe music, food, and maybe a sport. It's rarely politics. It's rarely religion. It's rarely idea-based. It's more routine-based. So you say, oh, you like listening to rock music? So do I. Or you say, wow, you really like opera or qawwali or folk music? So do I. Maybe we should go to a concert, or maybe we should listen to it together. And then food. For example, I have a couple of friends who are insanely in love with either Chinese food or pizza. And rather than say to them, hey man, let's meet sometime and maybe eat something, you're like, hey, I'm in the mood for pizza. I'm pre-millennial, that's why I use this. I'm in the mood for pizza. Would you like to grab a slice? And then they're like, sure, where you go? I'm going to head. See you there in 2 hours. And we go have pizza, have a bit of a chat, and it's done. There are certain things that one can really find. Sometimes sports help, like if you're going to play a round of golf, squash, running, climbing, and so forth, but that's more of a physical activity. Sometimes you can't have a long conversation while you're having a tennis match. It's normally after. But similar to that, there's poetry, and you tie it to music. And it not only develops your expression and the way you speak and the way you make an argument, but it also strengthens this bond that you're developing with people, because you might say, well, I know Shakespeare. And then say, I know Shakespeare. I watched this interview with Denzel Washington at the Stephen Colbert's show. What is it? Is it the Late Show, Tonight Show? Whichever. I stopped paying attention after Letterman left. And Stephen Colbert Stephen Colbert went to drama school as well. He's close friends with Steve Carell and so forth. And Denzel is Denzel. So they were sitting, he was interviewing him, and suddenly Denzel said something about Shakespeare, about Hamlet. And Stephen said, "Oh, I could quote this to you." And he recited a verse. And Denzel went, "Yeah, and?" And he encouraged Stephen to go further. And Stephen just speaks, and Denzel's following his, what's the word, soliloquy, his way of expression, and then Denzel completes it, and then back and forth. And the way they looked at each other during, but more so after it was done, it was a, I see we have something more to talk about. That's very interesting. That bond, I noticed many examples of poetry doing that. Many examples of poetry doing that. And I find that to be incredible. I think that's incredible. And I thank my mum for having this foresight and being able to show us, have these things ready so you can use them wherever. And the beautiful thing about poetry is it's so multifaceted. There's so many tangents coming out of it. So you can really apply it to different scenarios and situations. So if somebody's talking about difficult times, right? You can simply say, "जो था नहीं है, जो है ना होगा, यही है एक हर्फ मेहरबाना, करीब तर है नमूद जिसकी उसी का मुश्ताक है ज़माना." So it's Iqbal, I can't translate it, please. But it's talking about time. And there's another series of verses. It's in a movie, जब जब दर्द का बादल छाया, जब गम का साया लहराया, जब आंसू पलकों तक आया, जब ये तन्हा दिल घबराया, हमने दिल को ये समझाया, दिल आखिर तू क्यों रोता है, दुनिया में यूं ही होता है, जो गहरे सन्नाटे हैं, वक्त ने सबको ही बांटे हैं, थोड़ा गम है सबका हिस्सा, थोड़ी धूप है सबका किस्सा, आग तेरी बेकार ही नम है, हर पल एक नया मौसम है, क्यों तू ऐसे पल खोता है, दिल आखिर तू क्यों रोता है. Don't ask me to translate all of this. However, it covers so much about heartbreak, about life, about humanity, about the passing of time, and so much. I'm sorry, I can't translate it. It's from the movie, 2011 movie, Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. Please watch it. It's an Indian film. It's a fantastic film, and it has these series of these few stanzas. And it's interesting because you watch it and you're like, I have this habit of memorizing poetry or limericks or jokes. I'm going to memorize that. And I ended up doing this. Last one. I have been in sorrow's kitchen and licked out all the pots. Then I have stood on the peaky mountains wrapped in rainbows with a harp and a sword in my hand. Sometimes I feel discriminated against, but it doesn't make me angry. It merely astonishes me. How could anyone deny themselves the pleasure of my company? It's beyond me. Zora Neale Hurston. There are countless other examples I can give you, but you see what it does. It packs everything up, and you could throw this in so many scenarios, and somebody would say, "Is that Zora Neale Hurston?" Yes, I've loved her, and so forth. It's such a strong social glue. It's such an intellectual elevator. It's so many things, and it's just that one lesson of considering poetry as your ally, which my mom has taught, which I'm ever so grateful for. So I'll stop here because I think, it's almost 20 minutes. But poetry is your ally, lesson number 41. Thank you so much for joining me again today. Have a wonderful week, and I shall see you very soon. Goodbye.